I think it does definitely carry more weight in the minds of fans when a championship comes from a situation where there's a lot more perceived hardship on the road to that particular championship. Like you talked about LeBron earlier, but if you look at to add to that, if you look at LeBron's championships that he actually has, exclude the Lakers championship, you look at his 2 championships with the Heat and his championship with Cleveland. And like if we're talking weights of rings, that Cleveland championship weighs more than those 2 Heat championships combined, because
Let me put you on game.
let's move into our next conversation. Let's talk about NBA champion and finals MVP, Giannis Antetokounmpo. He had a really interesting quote during his finals presser that I thought that we should talk about. He said, "It's easy to go somewhere and win a championship with somebody else. It's easy. I could go to a super team and just do my part and win a championship. But this is the hard way to do it. And this is the way to do it. And we did it. We effing did it." So I wanted to talk about Giannis and not necessarily Giannis, but mostly like his championship. And I wanted to ask, does Giannis leading a non-super team to a title in a city where he was drafted make his title carry more weight than others who did the opposite, like building a super team or going to another city in order to pursue winning?
This is tough. I think that the NBA is very big on narrative, as well as being able to grow a championship organically in some ways. There's some kind of perceived extra value to that. But at the end of the day, it really depends on the perspective, because if you're a fan base in one of these markets that is able to build a super team, you're excited and you feel like these championships are worth their weight in gold. Just as much as a small market or mid market that's able to organically build a roster out and, get championship level talent and deliver a ring. And so I don't believe that they're worth more, objectively speaking, but it's all in the eyes of the beholder. I think that people kind of looked at the NBA over like maybe the last 7 to 10 years of the super team era. And it feels a little sour because it's like out of nowhere, you build a super team and it takes the narrative joy out of the season, where it's almost a foregone conclusion who's going to be in the finals and who you expect to win the finals.
Right.
And so it makes it all the more exciting when the favorite team doesn't actually win. So you look at a situation like the Dallas Mavericks in 2011 when they beat the Miami Heat. And it was like, holy crap, like they beat the big three. This big three is supposed to win not 4, not 5, not 6.
Not 7.
Not even realize that Bosch was not even going to be in the league 7 years down the line. And just that kind of, just all these different ways that these teams don't actually pan out the way you expect them to. So there's some excitement there. And that's why you see a championship in Dallas as something really special with Dirk getting his 1 ring. And that's why it weighs so much. Same thing when LeBron won in Cleveland. It was like, holy crap, they were able to come back from 3-1. They beat the 73 win team, and nobody expected that to happen because it seemed like they were just unstoppable. And then you contrast that with the super teams that the Warriors were able to create. The narrative joy of the NBA those seasons was really down. And you just saw people like, like we already know what's going to happen, what's supposed to happen. And the Warriors won 2 in a row, like they should have. Even though they were, and what's interesting is that those seasons, there's nothing guaranteed. Players still have to show up. Players still got to play healthy. But I guess when it's all said and done, we all know who the favorite should be. And what also sucks about that is that the Toronto Raptors, they got robbed of a little bit of narrative joy as well, because they won a championship not because they were the best team, but because they were just the healthiest team, and they outsurvived the health of the Warriors. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I feel like that happens in so many different seasons. I think that there's a conversation we could definitely have about like titles with asterisks on them. But like a lot, I think you can make an argument that like half of the championships in NBA history have that on them. Like the Warriors won in 2015 when LeBron went up against them alone without Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving, you know. But there's so many different, and this championship this year, like the Nets didn't have Harden or Kyrie available. The Clippers didn't have Kawhi Leonard. Like there's so many different factors at play when it comes to these kind of things. Like you just whoever wins, whoever is who wins. You know, it's a 7-game series. It's not like football where it's just one game. So the best team does win. It's just injuries are just kind of a part of the process. But on the original question, I think it does in the minds of fans. I think it does definitely carry more weight in the minds of fans when a championship comes from a situation where there's a lot more perceived hardship on the road to that particular championship. Like you talked about LeBron earlier, but if you look at to add to that, if you look at LeBron's championships that he actually has, exclude the Lakers championship, you look at his 2 championships with the Heat and his championship with Cleveland, and like if we're talking weights of rings, you know, that Cleveland championship weighs more than those 2 Heat championships combined, you know, because of the narratives, like you said, and the struggle to get there, beating a 73 win team. Like even though Cleveland essentially had a super team, like it wasn't technically or it wasn't technically as viewed as a team that was as good as the Warriors team. So it was kind of a Herculean effort. Dirk, like you said, in 2011, Kawhi in 2019, like those championships carry a lot of weight. And Giannis's championship, that's a heavy one right there, especially considering everything that led up to his performance in the finals. I think that there is something to be said like for the weight of championships, because when we look back at these players' careers, like, you know, I hope he's healthy and he's able to push towards a championship. But if we're talking about Kevin Durant, let's say him or Giannis, like neither one of them wins a ring for the rest of their careers due to whatever circumstances. I think people will view Giannis's playoff success in a more favorable light than they will Kevin Durant's because of the Warriors, the nature that they came together, you know?
Yeah.
So whether it's fair or not fair, that's just kind of how it's perceived, because the Warriors, even though winning a championship is hard, it's less hard than winning a championship that Giannis won, I think, under the conditions that he won it under.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you make some really good points, and I think that that's really fair. I think that guys are very, you know, it's a lot of context dependent factors that just drive the narrative of the NBA. And I think a guy like Kevin Durant is going to go down as, you know, a Hall of Famer, obviously, but him not being able to win in Brooklyn is going to kind of weigh negatively against his career more than the fact that Giannis just won in Milwaukee. And so it's really, I think it's in some ways it's unfair because guys are almost in an unwinnable situation. But I think guys also kind of go from one extreme to another, where it's like, okay, I'm not on a championship caliber team, so now I want to stack the cards in my favor. I go from like not having any championship talent or just being short of championship talent to having overwhelmingly favorite championship talent around me, you know?
Yeah.
And we just want to see somewhere in the middle is a good balance where there's parity and there's a feeling like, oh my gosh, you earned it, but you really earned it because you didn't
The
just
Nets minus James Harden.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically, like not KD carrying the team by himself, but you know, some help. Like I think that once we see James Harden join the club, I think that for a lot of fans, like, and I try to check myself and not get too like deep into it in that way, but it does kind of make it feel like if they were to win with that big three, it's just like, oh, like, all right, cool. You know, rather than it kind of makes us as fans in a weird, almost selfish way, kind of ignore what it takes to win a championship, because to us it looks so easy.
Yeah.
you know. So just like I think we're both saying the same thing. Like narratively, they way different, but in terms of the actual journey itself and what the players go through, I think it's probably all the same.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, you got to go out there, you got to compete. And I give all these guys a ton of credit when they're able to make it to the promised land, because whether or not you stack the chips or you don't stack the chips is really hard.
Yeah.
And we've seen many great teams with very, very Hall of Fame level players just not able to get over the hump. And
Yeah.
just how the dice roll,
Like LeBron. I mean, he's lost way more finals than he's won, and people kind of use that against him. But it's like yo, he made it to the finals that many times. Like that's an achievement in and of itself. You know,
Yeah.
even with Chris Paul this year, like he lost, and people, if he never wins a championship in his career, there's going to be a lot of posturing about how he isn't this or he isn't that. But I mean, let's talk about what he is. He's a great player. It takes a lot to win a championship, and there's only one winner, and he just wasn't him this year, and it wasn't him for the rest of his career, at least prior to this point. So yeah, we'll have to see what happens with the NBA narratively going forward.